Tell us a little bit about what your main focus is. You've been looking a lot at the program for tax credit scholarships for education in New Hampshire. Can you tell us a little bit about how New Hampshire is a little different from other states?
So New Hampshire is the youngest operating program. It's only been in operation this is still its first year. It's the only scholarship tax credit program that includes homeschoolers. So in New Hampshire, corporate donors get an 85% tax credit for donating to registered nonprofit scholarship organizations that fund low and middle income students. And they can attend out of district public schools, private schools, and they can actually do homeschooling. So the scholarship organization would reimburse families for a list of approved educational expenses, including homeschool curriculum, textbooks, online learning, tutoring, etc.
Now you say it's the youngest operating program. Tell us a little bit about the growing pains in that first year or two, or as it's being set up.
Right. So in the first year, it faced a repeal effort. It passed with overwhelming support, but the legislature had changed in the interim, and so it faced a repeal effort. The law had been repealed in the House, and then narrowly was saved in the Senate by 2 votes. At the same time, it's facing a lawsuit. There was oral arguments last week in front of the New Hampshire State Supreme Court. So that has scared away some donors because they were worried that they may contribute to the program, and then before the money was used, the program would disappear, and they didn't know if they would be getting their money back or not. So in the first year, there was only about $125,000 in donations, and that funded a little over 100 students. But assuming that the state Supreme Court rules in the same manner that the U.S. Supreme Court and the Arizona Supreme Court have ruled, and find that the program is constitutional, then the program is likely, as other programs around the country, to expand greatly in the coming years.
Now, what's the case that people make to say that it might not be constitutional?
So the New Hampshire Civil Liberties Union and the Americans United Against Separation of Church and State have sued the program, claiming that it violates the state's historically anti-Catholic Blaine Amendment, which says that public money cannot be used at a parochial school. The thing is, what we're dealing with here is not actually public money. This is money that goes from a private donor to a private nonprofit to private citizens who are parents, and then is used for educational expenses. At no point, as the U.S. Supreme Court noted, does that money enter the tax collector's hand, and at no point does that become public money. Just as if I made a donation to a religious organization, I would get a tax deduction, or for that matter, a church itself gets a property tax exemption. They would otherwise owe a property tax, but they get a 100% tax exemption. And yet we don't say that church is now funded by public dollars because it gets that exemption, or because donors to that church get tax deductions. We recognize that that is not public money, that is private money. And so there really is no issue here.
Now, I guess someone might claim that since tax money, these tax credits are given, that tax money is diverted away from other uses like public schools. Can you address that type of a claim?
Yeah, well, first of all, there are savings. I mean, the New Hampshire program was specifically designed to produce savings. On average, New Hampshire public schools are spending around $15,000 per pupil, whereas the average scholarship is only $2,500 per pupil in New Hampshire. And that's the maximum. The actual average was just a little over $1,000 per pupil. And there have been studies in other states. For example, in Florida, they found the nonprofit legislative budget office, the nonpartisan legislative budget office, found that the programs, for every dollar that they did not collect in tax revenue, they actually saved $1.44. So this is not a program that hurts the public schools in any way whatsoever, because it actually saves money for the state.
So assuming that there's no decrease in the tax, in the budget for the public schools, they actually have more money available?
Yeah, and the size of the program is infinitesimally small compared to what the public schools are spending. I mean, we're talking less than 0.1% of what the public schools are spending. So this is simply not going to affect public school spending.
Now, another criticism you hear about programs like this is that it's a subsidy for rich people to pay for their private schools.
No, in fact, in New Hampshire, the maximum that a family could earn is 300% of the federal poverty line, which was around $68,000, $69,000 for a family of four. But in reality, in terms of the recipients in the first year, 91% qualified or would have qualified for the federal free and reduced price lunch program, which is around $40,000 for a family of four. So these families really are low-income families who have a clear financial need.
Now, New Hampshire is not a particularly urban state. You know, are you finding that this would be useful in more rural areas in addition to more urbanized
particularly
areas?
for the homeschoolers in the rural areas, but there are, in about 2/3 of the state, there is a private school within a 10-mile drive. So, you know, it's not everywhere has a school that's nearby, but most of the state, and actually in that 2/3 of the geographic state is where the majority of the population lives. So most families in New Hampshire have other private options nearby, and also the program, as I mentioned, could be used for out-of-district public schools.
Now, you said it's been very small in the first year. You know, assuming that everything works out with the courts, how large do you expect it might be within a couple of years once it really gets going?
As Yogi Berra said, it's difficult to make predictions, especially about the future. So I don't know how big it's going to be in a few years. The maximum number of credits is $3.4 million. So I'm not sure how many students that could take, but I expect it'll be a few years before they hit the cap. Certainly I expect the program to more than double in the next year. And then once more people know about the program and it's on firmer ground, I expect that it will grow rather quickly, as we've seen in other states.
So there's a cap on the overall amount of tax credits that can be given. Now, is that normal? Is that common across states?
Yeah, most states do have a cap, but in New Hampshire they have what's called an escalator. So anytime the amount of credits come within 90% of the cap will increase by 25% in the next year. So it allows the program to grow organically over time and allows it to meet demand.
Now, you had mentioned before the court case was a church and state question. Are there other kind of oppositions groups to a program like this?
That's been the main argument against the program. So I can't say if there are other, if they may have some other arguments in their pocket that they'll bring out later.
Well, you mentioned that there was a recall and then it faced difficulties in the new legislature.
There was a repeal effort. The primary argument they were using is that it's unconstitutional. And then there was a spurious argument that this was going to negatively affect the public schools. But the fact is it's designed to save money, so it's not going to impact the public schools.
Now, one more question about who gets to take advantage of this. It's often programs of this sort, any type of program to allow students more choice into private options, says that, you know, this will leave the worst students behind because the special needs students or the most desperate students or they won't be chosen by the private schools. Can you address that?
There are a lot of private schools whose mission, I mean, this is particularly the Catholic schools and some of the other religious schools, but there are a number of schools whose mission is to deal with the most difficult students, the students that come from the most disadvantaged background. And the proof is in the pudding when you have 91% of the students that qualify for a free and reduced priced lunch. I mean, these are the students who are coming from the most disadvantaged backgrounds in the state, and they are getting access to a better school based because of this program. 97% of parents said that they were satisfied with the school that their child is attending with this program, and 100% of parents who previously had a child in a public school said that they were more satisfied with their chosen school than the public school that they were attending before. And 2/3 said that even within this first year, they noticed measurable improvement in terms of their child's academic performance. So this really is a program that is helping the least advantaged students, and they're making measurable progress.
Now, I imagine, as in most states, New Hampshire has some excellent public schools, and presumably not very many parents would need to, or feel the need to, take advantage of a program like this to get out of their already good public schools. Is that part of the story?
New Hampshire does have some great public schools, and I was privileged that I grew up in a community that had a fantastic public school. But even in the best performing public schools, we shouldn't expect that every single student that lives within a given geographic area is going to be a good fit for that school, or that school is going to be a good fit for them. So even when you have a high-performing school, you may have a child who would be better off in some other type of program that's not a traditional public school classroom. And so we should be moving toward a system that allows greater educational choice so that we can tailor education to meet the individual needs of individual children.
So some of it is really about matching students to the school that fits them best, rather than just something that's called a good school.
Right,
it's really
absolutely.
a good school for them.
Right, and also we find that the better schools are in districts that are wealthier. And so right now our education system, there is a market for education, and it's called the housing market. If you can afford to buy a large expensive house and pay the higher property taxes, then you can afford to send your child to a higher performing public school. But for those families that can't afford that, they're generally stuck in a district that has a less competitive school, a lower performing school, and they don't have the financial means to either move to the higher performing district or to send their kids to a private school. And that's exactly what this program is intended to address.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Jason, for taking some time with us.
Thank you for having me.